It's May 25th, 2016. I'm Sue Cohen, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Marcy McCollum today for the San Marcos Heritage Association. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about where you were born and family and parents' names, that kind of thing, Marcy?
Well, I was born in Houston, so I'm not a Bism, but I was born in 1937 and lived in Houston until I graduated from high school. And then I went off to college at Texas Tech, got my degree and then went to work in Fort Worth. You know, moved around from job to job a little bit. Went to work as an engineer at General Dynamics, and then later moved to Houston and went to work at NASA. I was a computer programmer at that time. And my husband was a PE major. He was a high school coach. He made about $6,500 a year as a coach. And in 1965, he was offered a job at Camp Gary in San Marcos, making $10,000 a year.
Ooh.
Big pay raise. So we were so excited, and we moved here and lived at Camp Gary on the base. Had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment, base housing for $82.50 a month. No utilities. So we thought we had died and gone to heaven.
And what was his name?
Ben
Okay.
McCollum. And he was a PE coach out there for 5 years, I think. And we liked San Marcos so well, we had moved around a bit as a coach normally does, and decided we wanted to stay here. So we were going to go into business. So what business? And I didn't want to flip burgers, so that's how we ended up in the clothing business. And we started out with a store called Marcy's next door to the first Sack Pack in town. The first Sack Pack was on the corner of Hopkins and Moore. And it was a little bigger than it is right now, and there was a space we could lease, and that's where we started our business. Then we opened the next year the Pink Place over in Nelson Center. And then in 1972, I think it was, we opened Carnaby Square next to the show place on LBJ. But lots of things have changed since then.
So what kind of stores were those?
Those were all clothing stores, and then later we built the building where Chimmy's is right now, and had Marcy's on one side and River Togs, a children's store, on the other side. And so we had 4 different stores in San Marcos: a children's store, a junior store, a young woman's store, and a Missy store.
So you kept all those locations.
I kept all those locations, and I ran up and down the alley from one to the other all day long in my high heels. Back then you wore high heels. Oh. And my kids grew up in the store, just are roaming around the square visiting the various businesses. They would go to Duke and Ayers, where they had the little colored chickens, and go through all the different businesses. And I'm trying to remember.
So your kids were born here, their business?
No, my daughter is. She is 51. I came here pregnant.
Okay.
And she was born at the old hospital, which at that time, not the old one, but the one on Interstate 35. There's a big apartment complex there now. It's
Was it on Thorpe Lane? Oh, it was on.
No.
It was on right near Springtown. That's where the hospital was in 51.
Springtown.
Shopping center.
Well, sorta. It was on Interstate 35 between Aquarina and the exit to HEB. What exit is that?
Highway 80.
Yeah, it was in
So
between.
that was 1951 when she was born?
1965.
65.
She is 51 years old.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So that's where that number came from. But in 1965, when we moved here, there were 4 traffic lights on the four corners of the square, and that was it.
Wow.
And there was not a bridge on Hopkins Street over the river. You had to go around by the baseball stadium and back around that way to get to town. And the main traffic was up and down LBJ and Guadalupe. So.
And it was one way back then, just like it is now.
No, I think that came a little later.
So it was two-way.
Two-way. And Kelly was born at the hospital, and at that time they would not allow children in to visit. So my husband had to bring my son, who was 3 years old at the time, to the window outside so he could look in and see his sister. So that's changed a lot too.
Yeah.
And another thing I remember is living at the base and coming from Houston. I didn't know that everybody in town knew everybody. So I went shopping on the square one day and saw a pair of shoes I thought my husband might like, and the man said, well, take them with you and let him try them on. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's going to trust me? How does he know I'm going to pay for these? So I guess I took the shoes and let him try them. But that was really different. But they knew everybody, so they knew if you weren't a local, that they knew that you lived at Camp Gary, and they could keep up with their merchandise.
Wow.
But things were really different. Also, I remember there were 3 doctors in town: Dr. Moore, Dr. Primer, and Dr. Elliott.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember going to Dr. Moore and paying my bill for $10. Oh, and of course we didn't have all that kind of insurance that we have now, so you just paid your bill and went on.
It was a simpler time. I understand they would come to your house, do house calls, and.
Oh well, now I never did have that happen, but I'm sure they would have.
Yeah.
Oh, that was shortly after we moved here. I think in the 60s is when they started the country club. And a lot of that was, a lot of the work, a lot of the little extras like the gazebo and the tee markers and that kind of thing were done by the local people. You know, they would contribute money or time or effort or whatever it took to get it done. And that was the place to go and the place to be. And of course, nobody had swimming pools at their house back then, or very few people did. So everybody went out there to the swimming pool or the golf course or whatever was happening. But that was our big social life at the country club.
Was it called Quail Creek back then?
Quail Creek Country Club. That's what my kids called it. Oh, and when I moved here after I had Kelly, I had worked in engineering, and so I thought, there's not any place for me to work in San Marcos. And there really wasn't any place in Austin that was along that lines or had to do with computers or anything. So I thought, good time for me to go to Texas State and get my master's degree in computer science. Well, guess what? In 1965, there was not one computer on that campus, if you can believe it. And so that didn't happen. I never did get to go get my master's degree.
What was your major at Tech?
Math. But that gave me an entry into any kind of...
That was cutting edge for that time for a woman to be in engineering.
And computer programming was brand new.
Right.
I did that at NASA. And my last assignment there was to write a program for trajectories, so that if you change the yaw or the pitch, or it would change the trajectory. And Kelly blames me today still that they couldn't find John Glenn in the ocean when he re-entered.
The trajectory was wrong?
Yeah, something was wrong with my program.
So your kids went to school here in San Marcos?
My kids went to school here in San Marcos, and when they were out of school, they would come to town and roam around town and harass all the merchants. And I can remember when they were really little, like maybe 5 and 8, we'd let them walk off to the movie and go by themselves, and I don't think people do that anymore. And Kelly recalls, and I don't remember this, that they would rent skates in downtown San Marcos and skate all over downtown and up on the campus and have a grand time.
That sounds so neat. And everybody knew them, and everybody watched out for them.
Everybody knew everybody.
Right.
Oh, and we had 2 banks in town, State Bank and First National. And so everybody went to the bank. That was another little social spot. You'd go there and you'd see someone you knew. Or you'd go to the post office and there was always somebody there you knew. But it's not that way anymore. We have tons of banks and we have tons of doctors.
Now, did you have a lot of people we've talked to that had the businesses on the square said that people would just come in and they would sign their name and you would charge it and bill them just on there. They wouldn't even sign anything. They would get a bill.
We'd just charge it and they'd get a bill.
Right. That's the way it was at your stores.
It was a very trusting time, you know, like the man who let me take the shoes home without even knowing who it was.
And some of the people we've interviewed said when they were kids, they would just go to a store and say, I want those shoes, and then they didn't know how it happened, but somehow their parents got the bill for it.
And they would pay for it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And you probably walked down the street and took your deposit to the bank. It was mostly cash back then, I guess.
Well, cash and checks. And I know when they came out with credit cards, in the very beginning, we would say, would you like to pay for this with a credit card? Oh, no, I don't want to use that thing. But that has changed dramatically. I mean, now it's just practically all credit card.
Young kids don't carry any cash.
No cash, and then occasionally we'll get a check, and that's it. But
and that's all I stood in line behind somebody at the grocery store, and they were paying by check, and I thought, wow, it's changed totally.
Yeah, it really has. Our monetary system. I think it's going to keep changing.
I do. Now, with the college, when I was in college here, the college girls shopped at your Carnaby Square. Where did that name came from? That was when that come from?
Well, it was in the 70s when
the Beatles and the model
Twiggy.
When I was in college, your store was the place to
and so
get the fashions of San Marcos.
All of that was tied to London, and so the inside of the store had different places in London.
Right.
And it was a little square inside with a tree in the middle.
I remember it was a very neat store. Very different.
That is the Main Street office now, and most likely the tree's been removed. But that tree was there for a lot of years. And
there were shingles on the little storefronts inside.
Yeah. And the carpet was green shag for grass. And also, when we opened the Pink Place in 1960, I think it was 67, we had the first carpeted store in San Marcos. It was hot pink carpet.
And what age group was that store?
It was college. It was directly across the street from the dormitories. So they'd sell a book and come buy a dress. Dresses ran about $30 back then.
And girls wore dresses.
And they wore dresses. And then a little bit later they wore hot pants.
The 70s at the Carnaby Square.
Yeah.
Now, did you do the buying for all your stores?
Oh, yeah. I'd go to market and spend 4 days up there and get just overloaded.
Wow.
Just overwhelmed, you know. You try to keep it all straight in your head.
Now, what did Ben do when he stopped working for Gary? What did he do here in San Marcos?
He went into construction, building cabinets and doing custom work like that. And he built, of course, all our stores, did all the fixtures.
Okay.
And my present store, Trends and Traditions, was probably his last job, and he built all the fixtures in there. They're 15 years old now and still just great. All my racks are on wheels and we roll them off to shows, and it just has become real handy to have those wheels on those racks.
So you've been keeping women stylish and beautiful in San Marcos since 1965?
1966. Opened Marcy's when Kelly was
So
9 months
50,
old. I had the playpen down there, which you couldn't do that now, you know. And we didn't have any money. I don't know what we did to start that business. And
did they even have daycares back then? They probably didn't even have that.
No, they didn't. So I
Wow.
took the playpen, and she stayed in the playpen. And then as she got a little bit older and could roam around town, she'd roam around town.
And where did y'all live when you moved off of the base? Where did you move?
We built on Sierra Circle. Built a house, one of the first ones
I was
up
going to
there.
say, that was practically in the country back then.
It was. We had this beautiful view out our front window of the hill country. And I'm sure that view is still just as beautiful. Even though it's built up, you know,
Right.
the houses are down lower.
And were you active in things, Chamber of Commerce and the business world here in San Marcos?
Oh yeah, back then the Chamber of Commerce was another big social event, and oh gosh, I can remember their what do you call it when you have a fundraiser that's the gambling and the Las Vegas
Casino night.
Yeah, they'd have casino night. That would be a lot of fun. They did all kinds of good things, and back then we all went to parades. We would come to the Chillimbiad parade, and we would come to the Christmas parade, and Santa Claus would arrive in a fire truck. And
Where was the Christmas parade?
it was down around the square.
That was before Sights and Sounds of Christmas, I guess.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And Sights and Sounds been going on forever, for a long time.
30 some odd years.
Yeah.
So your kids went to Crockett Elementary or
No, they went to Travis. And of course, then we just had one junior high and one high school.
That was the high school on 123, the old high school.
The old high school, right.
And the college was so much smaller back then.
Yes, I don't remember the enrollment, but you drive up LBJ and just drive straight through the campus before they closed it off, and then you have to go around it.
And all the kids lived in the dorms.
Yeah.
Didn't have all the apartments
Didn't
that
have
they have
apartment city.
now. No.
Oh, I want to mention one more business. I don't know if you've been to Aqua Brew. It's brand new. They've been open 2 months. And that location was Herman Carf's furniture store.
That's on South LBJ.
South LBJ. And then it became the Costumed Occasions. And then it was bought, I guess, a year or two ago. And
It was Edwards Furniture before it was Costumes Occasions.
Was it Edwards?
It was Corf and then the Edwards.
Oh, okay. But anyway, they bulldozed the building down. And so when I went in there the other day and I looked at the menu, it said, these floors have been walked on in San Marcos for 100 years. And I thought, no, that's not right. This building wasn't even here. And I looked at the floors, and sure enough, they were the old floors that had been in Costumed Occasions and the furniture stores. And I don't know how they did that. I don't know if they pulled up the floors when they knocked it all down and then re-put the floors down.
I think that's what they said they did. It's beautiful, isn't it?
It is beautiful. And the bar they said that was out of wood
And some of the ceiling too.
from the old building. So
Well, San Marcos has changed. I mean, back then in the 60s, where did y'all go out to eat? There weren't any restaurants.
Oh, well, there was a Mexican food restaurant. Oh, gosh, who were the people that owned that restaurant? Oh, we used to go there all the time, but every time you went to a restaurant, you saw everybody you knew. And now you see no one you know. I mean, I look around and I think, where do all these people come from?
You couldn't go to the grocery store or out to eat without knowing you'd have to plan it when you had enough time to talk to everybody.
That's right. You had
And
to
now,
visit.
I don't see anybody. That's one of the biggest changes.
Yeah.
That and the
we
traffic
noticed.
that we've noticed on our day-to-day in San Marcos.
Oh yeah, it's a dramatic change when the students are gone.
Right.
And there was no problem parking today.
Yeah.
On the square.
And I guess all the business owners, y'all had a camaraderie of business owners, that the Sorors and all the folks that you had your businesses next to. Who was on the other? The movie theater was to the, as you faced the Carnaby Square, the movie theater. What business was to the left of you?
Cravonics.
What was that?
It was a sandwich place, and he was from Germany, and he had the best food in the world. And after he left, his daughter ran it for a while, and then of course I guess you get burnout on a restaurant quicker than anything, 'cause it's a lot of work.
Right.
And then next to that was a gift store, and I can't remember the name of that gift store, but
And then the tire shop and the gas station
Yeah.
has been there. That used to be, I forget who owned the gas station there.
oh, I don't remember either. But going the other way, where Chipotle was, that's where the Pontiac dealership was for years and years. And then, of course, Red Simon's Ford dealership still has his name on it, Red Simon. But those were dealerships. And the businesses then were small, but you could make a living out of it.
Right.
You can't make a living out of a little mom and pop anymore. It's just not possible. There's too many things involved with credit card processing fees and
Liability insurance.
liability insurance and on and on and on, just that we didn't have back then. And you know, people think things are expensive, but I mean clothing wise, but everything else is expensive too.
Right. Right.
We used to have style shows, which is a thing of the past too. We had big style shows at the drama building there on the campus to raise money for the Heritage Association for lots of years. And then we had style shows on campus in the student center for the sororities. And those always generated a lot of business. But it's very different now. You can't generate business with style shows or even get attendance.
Isn't that a shame? 'Cause
Yeah.
that was fun.
It was different and fun, and there are just too many styles out there now, I guess, and too many different tastes and interpretations.
Right. What are some of the big events and the big things that you remember in San Marcos living here?
Well, I remember Lyndon Johnson coming to visit San Marcos, and I got to see Lyndon Johnson and Lady Bird, which was a big event, because had you gone to something like that in Houston, it would be long distance, but you got to kind of get up close and a little bit personal. But
Was this when he was president, or
oh
back in the
gosh,
60s, running for
it was
president?
in
or-
the 60s. I don't remember. He had to have been president because he is the one responsible for the Job Corps,
Correct.
and that's where he came to visit, was at the Job Corps. And the Job Corps still functions today, but I don't know
So,
that it's as big as it was back then, or as important to the community as it was
so you
back
got
then.
all the townsfolk got dressed up and went out there to hear him.
Uh-huh. Yes. It was very exciting to have him come to our little town.
Yeah. Now, coming from Houston, I guess you lived through some floods here in San Marcos. That was something different for you, I would
Oh,
guess.
very
And Lubbock
different.
definitely didn't have flooding like this in Lubbock.
No, Lubbock didn't have flooding. We did have a flood. My son was in elementary school at Travis, and the river flooded, and so my husband and a group of men got in a boat to go across the river. Well, the boat started floating downstream, and they never made it across the river. So the National Guard came in their big trucks and drove around and got the kids out of school. But the kids had to stay till about 5 o'clock that day till they could get picked up. But, you know, we were blocked in San Marcos by that river. You just couldn't go across it. And if you had a train, you couldn't get across either. You couldn't get out of town. You were stuck. Now we have an overpass and a bridge on Hopkins Street.
That must have been a big deal when that bridge was built
Oh,
over
it
Hopkins.
was. It really was, because it really opened up the traffic pattern a whole lot.
Where was the grocery store back then when you...
Okay, the grocery store was West, and it was over here on San Antonio Street, a block off the square. It's a red brick building. It's still there.
It's where Patrick Rose's office is.
Yeah.
And that was the only grocery store in town in the 60s?
That's what I remember going to.
So H-E-B came after that.
I don't know. I can't remember where the first H-E-B was. Oh, I know where the first H-E-B was, or when I was here, was on LPJ, where the Taekwondo
Right.
place is.
And then it moved across where the old government center on MLK.
Right.
That used to be at Paul Bruner's. Was it Bruner's? Or Penny's used to be down there on off the square, J.C. Penney's. But I think it was a Paul Bruner's that was there across from the Golden Chick on...
Really? I don't remember Paul Bruner's being there, but it could have been.
I kind of remember that. But I could be wrong. Well, you've been in San Marcos a long time. What other major changes have you think have had a great impact on the city?
Well, of course, the university. I think we've kind of become overcome by the university with all the apartments and that was the major source of employment for many, many years, and it's still pretty big employment as far as we don't have industry or that kind of thing here, but I don't know why it seems like we're so overwhelmed by the university, but I don't think the proportion of students to local people has changed that much. It just seems like we have apartments everywhere, though, and
It does seem that way.
of course they didn't all have a car back then, and now they do. Everybody has a car. I think some of them have 2 cars.
They bring them out on Fridays.
Yeah.
Now, I just thought of a question. So, when you opened your first store here, did you have any retail experience? You were a math major in college.
None.
So
Zero.
how did you figure it all out? I mean,
Well, it was a trial and error thing. Ben was still working, so we had an income. He was still at Camp Gary, so we had an income. And we just started, if you could see pictures of our original store, the dresses were hanging this far apart. And we just plowed everything we took in back into inventory until we finally had a reasonable inventory.
see, that's another major change, I think, in San Marcos and in life today, that there was a lot of, you could start a mom and pop business back then and be successful and figure it out, but now it's large chains and corporations
And big dollars.
the small businesses are dying out
Yeah.
in San Marcos.
Yeah, oh, everywhere.
And
But that's another thing is you could not start like we did with minimum inventory and have people return to your store. They would say, well, they don't have anything. I'm not going there. But back then, you know, they were more forgiving, I guess.
Well, and you went to market. I think I remember that you would go and then you would call people and say, I bought something. I really think that you had a lot of personalized service in your stores, if I recall.
Yes, we did. And we still do that a lot to a great extent. And probably more so because we depend a lot on out-of-town traffic. We have a lot of out-of-town traffic. You know, in our present location, we get people from all the small towns around, but believe it or not, we have people who come from San Antonio to shop with us. We don't have as many from Austin, but we do San Antonio. Go figure. I don't know.
Do you get people that are on their way to Wimberley when they put that big road by there?
Yes, on their way from Houston to Wimberley. And then any of the small towns around, and New Braunfels, Seguin. It's interesting how that has changed.
I would say it is probably, you've stayed in business consistently, but it's totally different now than when you first started.
Oh, totally.
I mean, just going to market, and I mean, probably back when you started, you go to the bank and say, I need money, and they say, okay. Everything's very different now.
Everything is very different.
So you still go to market in Dallas?
We still go to Dallas, but you can buy various lines that you're really familiar with online. So that eliminates a lot of time in Dallas. And then we have to, you know, if it weren't for Kelly and her expertise with all the social media, I wouldn't still be in business.
So she's worked with you
pretty
since
much
how old?
The boss now.
She started working.
Well, she went off to college.
She got out of the playpen and finally.
Yeah, she got out of the playpen. Graduated from high school, went to college, got married, lived in Dallas, and then moved back to San Marcos and worked in Austin. And then I don't know what brought about the change. I guess she quit working in Austin and had some time on her hands and started coming to the store to work and never left.
And that's been
It's been probably 20 years.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. And she's developed a lot of our media, and she built our website, which is a great website, and even that's changing.
Right.
You know, we built 2 or 3 different websites because we had to change and to keep it updated. And that's another continuous inventory job to keep that website current and take off what's sold and add what's new and make the pictures and talk about it and the pricing.
Now, how old are Kelly's kids now?
Well, we just attended a graduation at Texas Tech. Her daughter graduated, and our son will be a junior next year, Caitlin and Daniel, and then she has 2 stepchildren, Justin and Lindsay. Lindsay is 24, I believe, and Justin's about 26 or 27.
That's pretty great to see that next 2 generations back here in San Marcos.
Yeah, and they're all close by so far.
Well, this is the place to be in the hill country in San Marcos.
Yeah, it's a beautiful spot. Well, and when we first moved here from Houston, we had so much out-of-town company. Everybody wanted to come visit San Marcos. It was so pretty. It still is.
And that hasn't changed.
No, that part has not changed. All the students who go to school here want to stay here, but can't figure out how to make a living. That's the tough part.
Well, any closing thoughts about all these years in San Marcos and being successful? And
well, it's been interesting, and we've met a lot of good people along the way, and it's been fun to be involved in their lives and their families and their kids, and get Christmas cards from them with all their babies and grandbabies and extended families. So it adds a lot to the mix of your life to get to be here, and I feel like we still know a lot of people like you used to a long time ago, you know. You just
Still
do.
a strong community sense, even though
Yeah.
we continue to grow.
Right.
And it's folks like you that have dedicated their careers here, their lives here, that have made it what it is.
Well, it's I guess like a living, breathing thing. It's always changing, and we'll continue to do so and improve, I'm sure.